A slight change to our program. Robert Schaefer was supposed to speak in the first session, but he's kindly agreed to address us now. He has a PDAC connection. He's the first vice president, former president of PDAC, but most importantly, he used to work at Kinross, and he's responsible personally for some significant discoveries made in Russia. Robert, thank you. Robert is also non-executive chairman of Amur Minerals, and another junior miner experiencing some success in Russia. Robert.
Thank you very much, Lou. Good morning, everybody. Dobro utro. As you can see, I've got a fairly complicated first slide because I am wearing two separate hats this morning. First, this is my first speech as the president of PDAC, as well as the chairman of Amur. So I've got a little bit of nerves, but I'm okay. I also wanted to congratulate all the women in the room on their International Day, and as a personal note, you're my favorite part of the human race. Also, please, welcome to the PDAC convention. I know it's a little bit late, but it's my first opportunity to welcome you personally. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate you attending this lecture today, which I'm going to describe both a very interesting exploration and development project in Far East of Russia, as well as a discussion of the PDAC in a little more detail that my predecessor Andrew Cheadle gave to you this morning, so you can see that the PDAC is not just a convention, but does a lot more in the world of mining than you may realize. By way of introduction, as Lewis said, I'm Robert Schaefer. I'm the chairman of Amur Minerals, which has made a major nickel-copper discovery in the Far East of Russia in Amur Oblast. We recently received our mining license, which was very exciting this past June, and we're now proceeding towards a production direction. I'm also the new president of the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada, also known as the PDAC. I have long experience working in Russia. Initially in 1993, I was a geological expert with BHP and working in the Arkhangels area. Then I became the vice president of exploration for Kinross Gold, at the time in which we became involved with the Kubaka mine and subsequently the discovery of the Berkechan deposit as well. We did this in close work and in conjunction with our Russian partners there. We shared data, we worked together. This discovery was truly a mutual effort. And finally, I'm now with Amur Minerals, and we're moving our new nickel copper base metal sulfide discovery towards the feasibility stage. The first part of my presentation, I'm going to talk about Amur and the nickel copper project that we're developing, and then I will transition to discussing a little more detail about PDAC. Because I'm going to be speaking a bit about a publicly traded company on a stock exchange, I have to show you a disclaimer that anything I say must be read. I want you to look at this very closely. We're going to have an examination at the end of my presentation, so there'll be questions asked. This is a bit of a complicated slide. It's got a lot of data in it. I'm going to try to sum it up for you in about 3 or 4 sentences. Simply stated, our project, as well as almost all base metal and precious metal projects in the world would suffer in today's global economic environment. Obviously, everything looks better when the metal prices are improved and the global economic system is working better. Right now, more than 60% of the global nickel producers are losing money. The key consumer, China, is growing, but much slower than it has in recent times, and yet it's projected that Chinese supply will be in deficit in 2016-2017, according to Wood Mackenzie. So in conclusion on this slide, that despite the current price challenge for nickel, its long-term fundamentals are positive, especially for the deposits like our Kumranier project, which is a nickel sulfide project. Again, Amur Minerals is developing what we believe and now recognize to be one of the world's largest nickel sulfide deposits in the world, located in Far East Russia. The company has done this since we've been working there since 2004, and we've done this all with private funding, and thus far without any government financial assistance. This nickel project has a genuine potential to open up a significant portion of frontier Russia to development through new infrastructure, new jobs that will be created as a result of mine development. The company has really established a very strong support system and a working relationship with the Ministry of Far East Development, as well as the Ministry of Natural Resources and Rosnedra as well. We're planning to produce approximately 50,000 tons of nickel in concentrate annually once in production, and has the potential to expand beyond that. The mine will become a strongly positive economic stimulus for this region of Russia. Okay, again, I'll really ask you to focus on the graph in the northeast corner of the slide. You can see that Kunmanye, the project, is ranked in the top 10 nickel deposits in the world. Once we reach production, we'll be ranked with the best. Currently, we have over 800,000 tons of nickel metal in concentrate, and as a result of a very successful exploration program in 2015, we'll likely increase not only the dimensions of the deposit, but increase the grade as well, thus improving the economics. We've already initiated our 2016 drilling program. We're drilling about 15,000 new meters of core to infill, to improve the certainty of the deposit, as well as expand it to some degree. At this point, because we're moving towards a feasibility study, the style of financing for the project is also going to be changing. It's going to be changing from project scale financing, which requires anywhere from $2 to $5 million a year, to bankable feasibility study, which we see is going to be costing in the neighborhood of about $50 million a year. And finally, the production side. I want to show you a few pictures of our project area. This is the discovery outcrop at Vodorozdalny prospect area. You can see it's in the middle of not a lot of infrastructure. Here's the camp that we've built. It really looks like a western town, if you will, at the frontier of the frontier times. A transportation vehicle that looks a little bit different than what we use generally here in Canada. And one of our drill sites, and you can see the drill road infrastructure we're developing. From this site, you can look down and you can see that our exploration town at the bottom of the valley. This is a really important map from my perspective, and probably is the key to my entire presentation this morning. It illustrates the location of the current and planned infrastructure for Amur Oblast. To the west and to the south, I wonder if this has a, no, we don't have a pointer, no. Okay, to the west and to the south is China. You can see in this area, the capital of Amur Oblast, Blagoveshchensk, bridge over across into China to the city of Huehue. To the north is Yakutia, and to the east is Khabarovsk Krai. Kunmanye is located in the northeast corner of the map, shown by number 1. The brown lines that you can see coming across the map in the north and coming south is the Baikal-Amur Railroad, also known as the BAM, and it's the lifeblood of the oblast. It brings in all the foods, materials, and supplies that are required in this part of Russia. I'm afraid of...
No, there isn't on this one.
Okay, no worries. That's the only time I needed a pointer. What we're planning to do is create an infrastructure corridor from the reservoir you can see at number 4, in which there's a major power plant going to the northeast to our project. At point number 3, we'll build a power substation together with electric arc smelter, so we'll not only be producing nickel concentrate from the mine, but we'll be producing a value-added product as well. So we'll be increasing the value of a potential export item as well as possible internal use. 50% of this roadway that we're planning to construct is already in rough shape in that it's being used by local placer gold miners at the present time, but we plan to make this a much more usable facility during the future. We're already in advanced discussions with development consultants, engineers, and so on to develop the costing, the construction parameters, and so on of this roadway, as well as we're in discussions with the Far East Development Fund as well to help finance this. This will be our first utilization of potential government assistance in development of an infrastructure corridor. This corridor also has potential for other users. There are coal operations potentially and steel operators that would be here, as well as I think it may be a stimulus for adjoining parts of Yakutia and Khabarovsk Krai as well. I'll tell you a little bit about what the Far East and Baikal Region Development Fund, it's also simply known as the Far East Fund. It was established to develop infrastructure in remote regions of Far East Russia. Its goal is to invest more than 700 billion rubles, or about $10 billion over the next 5 years. This fund is viewed by the Russian government to be a vital element in the opening and development of the economy and the population of Russia's Far East. Amur has held strategic discussions with the principals of the Far East Fund, and we issued a press release just last week in which we signed a letter of intent that is beginning to outline the terms of agreement for helping to finance the development of our access corridor. For projects such as Kunmanye in a remote frontier area, there are government incentives for development. With regard to corporate income tax, the first 5 years there's a tax exemption or tax holiday on profits and a reduced tax rate which would maximize at 18%, but reduced to 10% during the second 5-year period of production. The natural resource extraction tax, which starts at 0 but implements over a 10-year period, goes to 8% eventually. So you're given ample opportunity to pay back on your initial investments in making a new mine develop and grow in this part of the world. These tax incentives illustrate 2 points for Russia. First, that Russia is definitely open for business. And secondly, that the Russian government is acting on its promises. I'm going to talk a little bit about the operational efficiency that we're hoping to achieve at the Kunmanye project. I can sum it up really in 3 points. Kunmanye mine will be located in close proximity to 3 key potential consumers of nickel: China, Japan, and Korea. We'll be producing a value-added product, not just a nickel concentrate that is sold directly to a smelter. And we'll be using our capital very efficiently. We have the so-called capital intensity ratio, which is the amount of money used in the initial investment ratioed against the annual production rate, is among the most efficient in the world once we're in production as well. So we see this as a very robust economic project. Amur has been traded publicly on the AIM exchange since 2006. We're now moving into this pre-production stage where sources of capital financing are going to change from the small investor to major institutions. So the quantum of risk, although at an exploration quite high, the quantum of risk is diminishing. The quantum of dollars needed for expenditure is increasing. And the capital required also is going to be a very large number. The infrastructure costs we're estimating to be in the neighborhood of $300 million, the mine cost construction between $700 and $800 million. So we'll be looking for alternatives for financing. Among those will be debt plus equity, offtake agreements. We're open to discussing joint ventures as well at this point in time, and investment banks and other sources. We plan to have our definitive feasibility study completed by 2017. Construction will be about a 2-year time frame, so we're hoping to be in production by 2020. In summary, these are just a few of the few contributions that I'd like to highlight that will result of a new mine opening in the Far East of Russia. We'll have a new 320-kilometer infrastructure corridor connecting the BAM with the mine site, along which there'll be power, which will service not only the mine, but will service communities that will develop along the mine, that will be supportive of the mine, and other industries that will be created as a result of this development. So we'll have an employment multiplier as well as a capital multiplier. A new industrial hub will be developed as a result of the presence of a mine like this. It will be a long-lived mine, more than multi-generational. Such an event will also attract foreign investment, we anticipate. And this will, again, increase the multiplier effect in the region. The mineral resource extraction tax and the profit tax will contribute to local government as well as the oblast government, so that there will be serious contributions to the local budgets as well. I'm going to switch hats now and talk a little bit about the PDAC, so you can see what we do here as well. As I say, you know us as the organizer of a very large convention that brings people from all around the world. I've been a volunteer in the PDAC now since 1992. I was on the board of directors beginning in 1997, and my term as president is a 2-year term. It's an 8-year process. You go from first vice president, second vice president, president, and past president. All have very defined responsibilities and requirements. So it's almost a career-long volunteer commitment, which I encourage other people to do. I think it's exceptional when people can volunteer and make their business and their communities better. And most of all, I like the PDAC because it helps the junior exploration industry around the world. The PDAC focus is really on responsible and sustainable exploration, not only in Canada but around the world. As you can see from our mission and vision statements, we really emphasize this. We have 5 priority areas. Key to exploration is access to land. Without the access to the land, you have no place to explore. Access to capital pays for that, pays for the exploration to occur. One of the key new points is Aboriginal people. We're working hard to improve our relationships with Aboriginal people. Believe it or not, the mining industry of Canada employs more Aboriginal people than any other entity in Canada, including the government. We provide training for them as well as increased capacity for doing new types of work. We promote responsible, as I said, responsible and sustainable exploration. And again, new to us in the past 10 years is our international perspective on things. Wherever Canadian mining companies are working, we're there to help them as well. With regard to access to land, we're trying to maximize the land base available. We look to emphasize infrastructure development because, yes, you can fly diamonds and gold in and out of remote areas, but you can't bring base metal concentrates out of a remote place in the north. You have to have infrastructure. We promote geoscience improvement as well across the country. Our regulatory system needs to be predictable and needs to be efficient and needs to be robust. We need to have the government be responsive to us. And lastly, we're helping to instruct our companies how to be socially responsible so they have working plans when it comes to dealing with peoples in their communities. Almost done. Yes. Linked to this access to land issue is our work with the Aboriginal peoples. We have, as I mentioned, 2 goals: to improve our relationships between the Aboriginal people, their communities, and our companies, and as well to increase their capacity to work within our industry and their skill sets. Access to capital, we're working to reform capital markets to provide new sources of funding for the junior sector. As within this downturn, almost all of the funding for junior risk exploration is almost dried up. So we're looking at things as crowdfunding and so on. Also, we do this on an around the world basis by helping to increase the capacity in third world countries by showing them what are incentives and our disincentives for exploration and mining. And then finally, through our convention, we increase the linkages between companies, peoples, and governments. Key to us, what we call E3+. E3 was environmental excellence and exploration. We've added to that social responsibility as well. It's a handbook online, free to any company any person that wants to use it. It helps to establish a best practices way for carrying out exploration and development work wherever you're operating. On the international competitive side, we work with the government of Canada to improve trade policies. Outside of Canada, we look at 3 areas. Again, we work with our Canadian consulates and trade commissioners so that our companies can become familiar with what local practices are and how to best work with local peoples. We also provide technical assistance to governments where we're working when asked. Finally, I'd just like to say I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning. I hope you'll take some more time to get better acquainted with PDAC, consider becoming a personal or a corporate member. I think we've got a lot to do working together. Большое спасибо.
Robert, thank you very, very much for an excellent presentation, both with commercial impact and also in your new capacity as volunteer president of PDAC. It's an honor to have you here, and I'm very pleased to know that there is life after Kinross. I'd like to ask the panelists for our next session to please join me here on stage. Alexey Oryol, JP Natkin, Galin Nurjanov, Akbatir Nadirbayev, and Dmitro Kashuk. If you can please join me here. You won't be able to fall asleep because you'll be facing all of the audience, so please. That's it. Our first session went slightly longer than anticipated, but I hope you'll bear with us. Our first speaker in this session is JP Natkin. I have deliberately not included comments on people's biographies. I believe they're all in our brochure. But JP has extensive experience in financing and advisory in Russia. And he is the founding partner of Macro Advisory, a service that was established 2 years ago? 2.5 years ago. And I believe that he and his partner, Chris Weaver, are producing some of the best analysis on the macroeconomic and political situation in our region. So without further ado, JP will give us an overview of what's happening in our region. JP.
Thank you, Lou, for the kind introduction, and thank you, Lou, CERBA, and PDAC for having me here, and to the ladies in the audience, s praznikom. Here's to you. Without you, none of this would have been possible. It's a pleasure to be here in Toronto this week. Before I get into our sort of top-down view of the region, just briefly about Macro Advisory, as Lou said, my partner Chris Weaver and I launched the business the end of 2013, and we're very proud of where we've come in a short time. We are now one of the leading independent strategy, macroeconomic and political strategy firms focusing on the Eurasia region. Our footprint basically is from Belarus and Ukraine, Russia, all the way east. We now cover Mongolia. We put out an initiation piece recently on Mongolia. Cover Central Asia, Caspian, Black Sea region, all of Central Asia, and we also recently initiated coverage of Iran. So it's a very interesting footprint, and it's a region that, when it comes to the extractive industries and cyclical sectors, obviously is very important. And with that importance also, there are certain challenges on the political and economic side, which I am going to try and touch on. I think today we're going to be hearing a lot of very interesting thoughts and comments on the bottom-up side of things. So I'm going to try and touch on the top-down. And as Lou said, my firm, we publish macroeconomic and political strategy work. The bulk of what we do is more bespoke consulting. But what I'm going to touch on today is what we cover in our reports, which if anyone's interested, seek me out at the end of the, later in the day. I'd be happy to send copies of the presentation or some of our materials. So here we go. So let me just start out with a top-down snapshot of the region, where clearly I think most people recognize most of the economies are expected to see growth continue to decline. This on the back of weak hydrocarbon prices, as well as continued Russia recession contagion. That said, despite the sanguine picture, there are hopeful signs from some of the markets in the region. We've seen, for example, Georgia and Armenia remaining economically stable despite declining growth on the back of the contagion, as well as Kazakhstan, Georgia, and Armenia have been very proactive in working to attract investment, and mostly, you know, particularly this was touched on by the ambassador and Kazakhstan, pushing for more economic diversification. And also this has obviously been a big part of the Putin plan for some time in Russia. What's really driving the opportunities in the region, the China Maritime Silk Road project, I'll touch on in a little bit, is obviously a big factor with the move towards creating much more of an east-west axis for economic and trade flows. We've seen economic slowdown has actually served, in a sense, as a constructive catalyst for change. This has been particularly the case in Kazakhstan and in some of the other markets where the governments have stepped up the pace of reform. As well as now, it was touched on before, and I actually look forward to the presentation later, Iran's economy and market are opening. And it is actively working to improve trade links both with Europe and China via the region, which is obviously a very natural conduit. Nevertheless, hydrocarbon vulnerability is creating real problems for the region. It is what it is, and it's very hard to completely dodge the bullet. It's anticipated that the anticipated devaluation in Turkmenistan is a big concern. The perilous drop in Russia remittances has badly hurt Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, where these remittances historically have accounted for upwards of 35 to 45% of GDP. Succession concerns are compounding economic problems in Uzbekistan, and as well as the whole region has significant and legitimate security concerns throughout Central Asia on the back of fears of the influence of radical Islam and ISIS and other movements. In terms of Russia, snapshot, we've seen the old growth driver mature over the past decade. This has been a factor in pushing the government to concentrate on damage control. New industrial policy has become the major focus in Moscow, as there's a sense of greater urgency to start addressing economic problems. The government has also pledged to cap the ruble recovery if and when oil prices rise. And again, as I mentioned before, some of these slides are going to have some macroeconomic data. I'm happy to share the PowerPoint and some of the research that contains our forecast and assumptions if anyone's interested in it. So despite its heavy dependence upon hydrocarbons, Russia remains fairly stable. Government flexibility and the central bank's monetary policy have really helped boost domestic demand. We've seen the deficit remain at a manageable 25 billion dollars, or approximately 2.5% of GDP. The central bank has kept a banking crisis at bay while keeping Russia's foreign reserves relatively stable, and external debt remains relatively low. Russia is one of the markets that actually learned from its past experiences and mistakes. I think, you know, having been a student of emerging markets, I've been in the Russia CIS region for over 25 years, and I've been involved in emerging and frontier markets my entire professional life. It's fascinating watching, for example, Argentina and some of the Latin American markets. Just as frustrating as it is and as smart as they are, they just don't seem to capture the lessons learned. Brazil looked like it was starting to learn from past experiences, but now they've hit some other speed bumps. But I mentioned before about Russia's low debt. They've learned from their mistakes in the past, and they are trying very hard to follow the right path. We've seen, and we've seen popular support for the government policy in place, and really no signs of any kind of social instability, which is very important. So where do we go from here? What now? What next? We expect continued weakness through the first half. We expect GDP to contract about 3%. The outcome for this year, however, ultimately is going to depend heavily into what extent sanctions are eased. And I'm going to touch on that in a minute. There's specific sanctions that are more important than others. Oil price trends and the impact on inflation rates and budget spending are a key factor. We expect inflation to continue its decline to under 10% by the end of the month. It could rise again depending upon the ruble, where things go on that front. And the willingness of the central bank to cut taxes would be dependent upon inflation concerns as well as where the ruble is. So, Macro Advisory, we forecast 3 scenarios for Russia in 2016. A best case, a base case, and obviously a worst case. In terms of these different scenarios, the negative scenario would be oil prices remaining low, leading to further austerity, consumer spending remaining weak, and no gains from sanctions lifting till 2017. Our base case, oil recovery to the high 40s, financial sector sanctions lifted from August of this year, reversing capital flows, and that's probably, as I mentioned, of these sanctions, that is really the critical piece of the pie, or the critical piece of the puzzle. And consumer spending bottoming out and confidence starting to rebuild. Our bullish scenario, our best case, is sharp recovery in the oil prices, financial flows starting to improve ahead of sanctions, and consumer and corporate confidence starting to recover. Along with this, greater progress in localization and industrial policy. So again, we have what if oil price scenarios, which again I'll make available. So I mentioned about the sanctions. You know, this slide was prepared before the announcement of the EU and U.S. extending the sanctions. You know, despite the renewal of these sanctions, there remains hope that the financial sector sanctions will be eased. And this really is, as I said, the critical piece of the puzzle. We need to remember and keep sanctions in perspective. Look at the Chinese case. After Tiananmen in the late 80s, there were sanctions put against China, which in the US are still there. Yet they've had negligible impact on flow of funds into China. And at the end of the day, it's not so much how many sanctions, it's really which sanctions. So the hope is that the financial sector sanctions, we can see some easing there. Obviously, it's pretty clear where the line is drawn when it comes to when it comes to some of the sanctions, and at the end of the day, we really need to see some easing there. So, key growth drivers for Russia: spending on infrastructure. More competitive domestic economy, import substitution. We've heard this bandied about, but it is a policy that is real, and we're seeing some constructive impact potentially. An increased focus on value-added production. You know, when I first started getting involved in this part of the world in the early 1990s, it was stunning in Russia. It was one of the few places in the world where you could take a raw material, and after it was processed and manufactured, it lost value. We're beyond that. Russia is now at a point where there's much more of a focus on increasing value-added production, refining, etc. The EU, I'm going to touch on in a minute, the Eurasian Economic Union. It's politically critical for Russia to retain relevance throughout the region, and it is also a very important part of continued integration and a way for Russia to benefit from the Silk Road developments. And again, I'll touch on that in a few. And finally, increased diversification. Kazakhstan is not the only market that is trying to diversify. You know, Russia is not just oil, but hydrocarbons are dominant. The extractive industries and resources are dominant, and Russia's very keen to become less dependent upon the cyclicals and diversify its economy, but it's not an easy or quick process. Localization is, as we put it in our reports, the new mantra. It's really, at the end of the day, much of it is about localization. Key industries will be impacted. Import substitution has emerged as one of the top priorities. And I list some of the key industries where we're seeing this, these words actually translate into real actions. Some of these are the most strategically critical sectors, food and agriculture, pharmaceuticals, but also when it comes to the extractive industries, oil field services and infrastructure, there's obviously a strong focus because these are areas where there's a need for outside investment, there's a need for outside know-how, outside technology, but they want to do it on a more localized basis. So where does this take us? We refer to it as the slow L-shaped recovery. Creating growth outside the extractive industries is a massive challenge. And this is a process that's going to take many years, as well as a major commitment and follow-through. But with it, we see plenty of risk. Failure to reform will mean an extended period of low to little growth. There's a significant risk of increased social instability, which thus far has not been an issue in Russia, but is always sort of looming in the background as a potential. And all this means that the Kremlin has a huge incentive to ensure that things are done right. And what we've seen thus far is that they are standing behind that commitment. So, you know, the problems are equally large. The point is that long-standing problems and issues can no longer be ignored. An old friend of mine, Anatoly Aksakov, who's a senior member of the Duma, he's vice chair of the Financial Markets Committee. We were at a meeting in Washington many years ago, and he summed it up. He said, oil is the crack cocaine of Russia. And he said, when oil prices are high, we get lazy, complacent, and rich and fat. And hopefully the follow-through will continue during this period of depressed hydrocarbon and resource prices. But you know, at the end of the day, the problems and issues cannot be ignored. Following the next presidential election is when we're going to need to see these issues fully addressed. So I mentioned about the EEU. Russia has made it very clear, not just with words, but actions, that it really stands fully behind the EEU. We've seen in the past other attempts to create sort of similar alliances and structures. But as we said in one of our reports, this time it is different. Russia has been very supportive of the creation of an independent financial regulator based in Astana in Kazakhstan, which I think is a very important move. It's very substantive, and I think it underscores Russia's commitment to really making this work. So let me touch on some of the member states within the EEU and our thoughts from a top-down perspective. And as I mentioned before, Kazakhstan has been very proactive in its commitment to sustainable reform and economic development. The government promises to compensate the banks and people for the impact of devaluation, which is something of concern, which could cost upwards of $15 billion. Dollarization remains a big threat to the banking system. I'm not going to spend much time on Iran. I just want to say that, just point out that despite challenges both obvious and more discrete, it does offer a fair bit of opportunity, and again is clearly looking to become more of a player in the China Silk Road. Likewise, I'm not going to spend much time on Mongolia, which currently rides a very fine line between default and boom. The big key event is going to be in the elections in June, which should be a decisive event. Which will impact it whether or not they strengthen their position of the government. A stronger government position could result in more mining licenses, an increase in revenues, a resulting increase in FDI, and increased economic activity, all of which I'm sure are very near and dear to those in this room. So I mentioned before about the Silk Road. Again, this is a critical part of the whole strategy, and the EU is a big part of this. I'm just going to close out with my partner, Chris Weaver. Again, many of you know him. This is one of his favorite statements. Russia will be frustrating and profitable for investors with the right strategy and patience. There's opportunity, there's challenges. We used to call it the Russia hokey pokey, 3 steps forward, 2 back, a couple to the left, a couple to the right. But at the end of the day, it's becoming less complicated. It's becoming more of a straight line, and things are moving in the right direction, but not without its challenges in the short and medium term. So again, I want to thank you for having me here today, and again, s praznikom. Thank you.
Thank you very much, JP, for setting the stage. Your final comments about things are getting better, that really is a great entree to hearing specifics in our mining sector. And starting off with some specific examples of the evolution of mining regulation in Russia, I'd like to call on Alexei Orel. Alexei is the Director of Subsoil Policy in the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. He's an old friend of CERBA's and is speaking for, I believe, the third time at our event. Thank you, Alexei.
Thank you, Lou. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of the conference for providing us with the excellent opportunity to speak at this CERBA event. It is not my first time here speaking of the Russian government effort to improve the investment climate in the mining industry. And I would be happy to use this opportunity today to present what we have managed to achieve since last time. So my presentation today, is it the right device, right? Oh, okay. Okay, thanks. So my presentation today is entitled Improving the Legal and Regulatory Environment in Mineral Exploration. And I will try to present today along the following lines. We'll start with a brief discussion of the mineral resource base with particular accent on specific mineral markets, then identify the key challenges in exploration as we perceive them, provide the key features of the legal and regulatory environment in the industry, and in the final part, I will concentrate on what we have been doing to stimulate activities in mining exploration and development. Now, with the mineral resource base. The Russian mineral resource base is one of the richest in the world, and the country is at the top of the world ratings in reserves of diamonds, nickel, silver, coal, gold, and others. The mining industry, together with oil and gas, has provided more than 50% of federal budget revenues for the past decade and would continue to be the major source of revenue in the midterm future. Specific mineral markets in the country vary in terms of resource potential and degrees of the monopolization. So I'll briefly review the key variations. The following series of slides are very close in its content, and they basically depict the location of the major resource of this particular mineral and the resource base and the key players in this particular market. So in diamonds, you've got a significant mining resource still available, but the market is practically monopolized by the single producer, the Johnstock company or Rosa company, although the exploration perspective potential is still significant. In quite a different situation in the gold. The map shows the basic locations of the resource potential in the country. You can see that it's concentrated primarily in the Far East and in southern Siberian regions. The potential is very significant. The country holds the third place, I think, in terms of proved reserves of gold in the world. And regarding the market, the gold market and the mining market, it's quite active and there's no monopoly. There's quite a lot of active players in the gold business. This is the list of top key players, the top key companies, and there are no more than 10 companies which account for about only 40% of the gold production. Nickel is very similar to diamonds. The map once again shows the location of the resource in the country. The resource potential is very significant, but the industry is monopolized by a single company, Johnstock Company, Norilsk Nickel. Although the resource potential is a good entry vehicle for independent companies, private companies, and foreign companies as well, as you have seen in the example today of the Amur minerals. Iron ore is more like the gold market. The resource potential is located both in Siberia and in the European part, and the market is very dynamic, not monopolized. There's quite a few significant and smaller players in the gold market. This is the list of the key iron ore players, major producing companies, which account for about 60 to 70% of the production. And similar situation with coal, the market is very active. There are practically no monopolization and very large number of players of various caliber. This is the distribution of major companies in terms of production, and that accounts only for a small percent of the total number of players in the industry. So, concluding the first section, we can see that the resource potential is still significant, and there's a lot of exploration potential, even in those markets which may seem at the first glance to be monopolized, like diamonds, but there's still some companies, independent companies, active in mining exploration, in diamonds exploration, as well as the nickel exploration in the country. Now about some major problems and in exploration and the major challenges. So the country, Russia, in terms of its contribution to the world exploration budget, is not very prominent. It accounts for about 3 to 4%, which is pretty small compared to Canada, which accounts for 16%, and with some estimates to 18% of the exploration. But still, in terms of the in monetary terms, the total investment in exploration may be considered as significant. This slide demonstrates the major sources of financing. There are practically, quite obviously, two major sources. It's government budget and the industry financing. The diagram on the top of the slide demonstrates the relationship between the government and the industry financing. The government is the darker columns at the bottom, while the rest is accounted for by the industry financing. The total exploration financing has been steadily growing until 1915, and it's still not clear. It has, by preliminary estimates, it has gone a little bit down at the end of 2015, and we still have to see how it will be looking in 2016. So these are the summary of the major challenges. I would not just go into counting them. Once again, it's quite obvious there are macroeconomic factors influencing the industry. There are some other factors like limitations on import of modern technologies and others on the other side. And all these factors exert considerable pressure on the industry. And the three columns at the bottom identify the key directions which we see as working forward towards improving the situation with exploration. It's to maintain production levels in developed regions, to stimulate exploration activities in the new frontiers, which probably is a priority task for now, and also to try and develop new non-conventional ways of production for some kinds of commodities and minerals. Now about the legal and regulatory framework. So, first of all, the most prominent feature of the Russian subsoil legislation is the categorizing of the subsoil blocks in several groups. The most important probably is the so-called federal blocks, or blocks of federal significance, if it's translated directly from Russia. And those are the blocks which include both deposits, identified deposits and proved deposits, as well as just geological shows of uranium, diamonds, quartz, yttrium rare earth group, and some other minerals which are listed in the yellow column on the right. In the middle is the most numerous group of blocks, regular blocks, which are currently under a regular standard licensing regime. And the final group of blocks is local blocks, which includes mainly construction materials and other minerals targeted mainly for regional use. All these blocks are managed by different authorities. Federal blocks are under full authority of government, and allocation of the blocks requires a government decision. Regular blocks are under Ministry of Natural Resources Authority or its subsidiary Rosnedra, which actually carries out all the licensing procedures, and the local blocks are under the authority of the regional governments. So these groups of blocks actually create two different licensing regimes in the country. So the federal blocks is quite, not quite, probably somewhat different licensing regime. And so it provides for access only through auctions, no tenders. Government decision is required to hold an auction. Foreign participation without specific government approval is no more than 25%, and licenses normally combined for exploration and production. While on the contrary, the regular blocks may be accessed both through tenders and auctions, and there are no limitations on foreign participation in new discovery, but if a new discovery under input in the process of exploration on the regular block strikes a mineral of regular significance, the block automatically turns into a federal block. So this diagram is a generalization of the licensing procedure for blocks of federal significance. These are the successive steps which would be required for a company applying for a block of federal significance. So you start with the application, and which is processed by the ministry, and then finally submitting the draft the ministry develops a draft and submits it to the government, which passes the final decision, and on the basis of this governmental decision, the Ministry of Rosnedra will issue the license. The licensing procedure for regular blocks is practically the same in spite of the seemingly more steps, but these are more simple than in the federal procedure. But procedure is very simple. The key feature here is that the blocks will be provided from a special list of blocks allocated for applications, the list is developed by Rosnedra, and then the companies are invited to bid for the blocks just on the list. This is the general characteristics of the licensing regimes, which actually bring us to the major problems which we in the exploration encounter in developing and stimulating the exploration process. This diagram demonstrates which kind of mineral is the most not important, but the most required and of the highest interest to the companies. You see that first of all, gold is one of the most of the greatest interest for the exploration and investment, and at the same time, the comparative columns of the diagram demonstrate that not all applications can be just satisfied. And the same problem is with the auctions. The previous diagram was about the general application and total applications and licenses, while this diagram is comparison of the auctions. And this also demonstrates that about 50 to 60% of the auctions are finalized with the issue of licenses. Now about what we are trying to do to improve the situation and amend the legislation. So these are the basic strategic directions, which are the legal, economic, regulatory. And basically these are quite straightforward. So in the legal direction, we are trying primarily to soften regulations on the strategic block regime. In economic direction, we try to develop economic stimuli for exploration, and for regulatory, there are quite a few instruments to improve, or what we call remove the administrative barriers in the way of exploration. So on these directions, these are the latest, probably the latest of our efforts. On the economics direction, we have introduced the new tax rate on profit tax, property and mineral extraction taxes in solid minerals have been reduced for major investment projects, especially in the Far East. And it is in our ministry, are developing the draft law to amendment to the subsoil law to introduce deduction of exploration expenditures with 250% uplift against the profit tax. In the legal terms, we are working on reducing the criteria, the list of criteria for the federal blocks, and try to remove the shows of deposits, which is probably one of the least significant, but one of the greatest problems in dealing with the federal blocks regime. And also, we are trying to develop changes to legislation which would allow production of the associated components, which is also one of the problems which some companies, especially those who have been in exploration in our country, would probably know. This is just to demonstrate, the previous slide demonstrated just the major directions in which we work, and this is, it's not quite translated, but it's just to show that the list of our regulatory efforts and changes to the legislation in last and this year is quite significant. This is also a demonstration, one of the our efforts to reduce administrative barriers. And this slide demonstrates how we are trying to simplify the licensing procedure. The column on the left demonstrates how by the latest legislation, regulatory acts in the orders of the ministry, we are reducing the duration of the license process on the various stages. So you see that duration on different stages of licensing have been reduced nearly in half. Now, a couple of words about the concentration of effort in the Far East. It's the government decision to concentrate the economic effort and also the efforts in stimulating exploration and mining in the Far East. This slide demonstrates just the general map and major areas of concentrating mining and exploration efforts. And what is most important here, that for us the budget financing for the Far Eastern regions was increased by 40% last year, was increased by 40%. So 40% of the total budget financing for exploration was just allocated to the Far East, And this is the demonstration of the planned auctions and tenders for 2014, which have not been yet finalized and would move to this year, and also scheduled for 2016 in the Far Eastern areas. Now the final part, facilitating access to exploration on the so-called principle of license on application. So I would refer to my previous slides with the licensing procedures for federal blocks and blocks of regular regime. And this is the effort where we have tried to simplify the licensing procedure for the regular blocks. So you see, basically it is regulated by ministerial decree or ministerial order. And the licensing of application is quite obvious, that we simplify the licensing procedure and introduce the licensing process on the basis of first come, first served. The columns at the bottom demonstrate the dynamics of growing licenses, not applications, growing licenses and satisfied applications since this principle was introduced. And this is the final slide, which is actually the final statistics of the introduction of the license on application principle. So it demonstrates that the table demonstrates those kinds of minerals which have been in greatest demand under these minerals, and you can see that it's primarily precious metals. And the bottom diagram demonstrates the increase in licenses since the principle was introduced in mid-2014. So you see that until on the regular licensing regime, we had no more than 50 to 60, 65 licenses issued on application, while with introduction of the license on application principle, the number has increased 5 or even 7 times. So that I think I have exhausted my agenda for today, and that's probably it about our current effort, at least in general terms, and I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Alexei. Just stay there. If I may ask you just to stay at the podium, I have just a couple of questions. We will have time at the end to address questions, but just for those who are not aware, the license on application would be called in North American terms claim staking. And it's a very significant development. Our company has staked claim early in 2015, and the system works. But my question to Alexei is pertinent because there are some restrictions in terms of this procedure. Plots of land which, if I understand the regulation correctly, are limited to absence of resources higher than P3. If you could care to elaborate on that?
Yes, originally, as the first step was introducing this principle was accompanied by some limitations. A single applicant could receive just no more than 3 blocks with an area of about no more than 100 square kilometers, and the blocks should not contain any registered discovered reserves, and even evaluation of resource potential to categories P1 and P2. Now we have already prepared a draft developing this principle much further. So there will be we are increasing the number of blocks which a single applicant may apply for. And we practically remove all the mentioning about the resource potential. So actually, only blocks which do not contain registered reserves, already proved and registered reserves, will not be liable for this regime, or other blocks will be included.
Thank you. I have one final question, actually. I'm not entirely sure if I understand what the term shows of deposit. You had it on one of your latest slides.
Yes, probably don't know the exact translation of this, but you have reserve. Actually, it's in Russian terminology, it's indication of resource potential. It's not a deposit. It's just some signs that a deposit in this area is possible.
So no drilling results, no aero, geophysical?
No, just probably surveys, geological surveys.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Alexei. I'd like to ask Mr. Dmitry Kashchuk, the head of the Ukrainian State Geological Survey. Very pleased to have Mr. Kashchuk with us to make a presentation on the activities of his organization and on the mineral resource potential of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to present the mineral potential of Ukraine here. Sure, I want to congratulate our women in this holiday. So, as you can see, the mineral opportunities in Ukraine, in this site, critical risk mineral potential. Actually, in this way, we have a good conversation with the European Commission. On the white area, there is minerals critical for European Union, marked by stars as Ukrainian projects that can be competitive in the international commodity market. It's heavy rare earth elements, light rare earth elements, natural graphite, coking coal, niobium, germanium. So quality Ukrainian mineral projects available for the business transaction. There are gold projects, shield and transcarpathian belts, germanium, graphite, iron ore, rare earth element projects, lithium projects, titanium plants, and coking coal. So, like introduction. As you know, in the May 2015, Ukraine government signed with EU association agreement. It was signed during the Eastern Partnership Summit in Riga, and deepened comprehensive free trade area negotiated from 2007-2011 and signed it in 2014. It's already take force in January 2016. Also, the Geological Survey of Ukraine owns and has explored mineral properties spanning a whole range of commodities, and is a second partner to explore and develop the mineral potential of Ukraine. You know that Ukraine is world-class producer of iron ore and steel, and manganese, and important producer of titanium, phosphorus, and rare earth elements from the large alluvial deposits. So let's go to the gold mineral opportunities. Located in central shield and western transcarpathian belts. Properties range from early stage drilling indicated mineralization to certified resources. One project with gold resources. All deposits have been known since prior to independence, and no new discoveries made since. All deposits benefit from excellent infrastructure favoring mining project economics. As you see on the map, May field is one of the most exciting green field in Ukraine. Actually, huge resources were invested to build the 340 meter shields. It's approximately $50 million. Concerning Transcarpathian belts, Saulac and Berego are two most known projects within the gold professional society. Both projects has proven gold resources. The only question is of capacity of the gold mill and mineralization metallurgical issues. There is comparisons with the similar projects in Canada and Brazil. Mineral resources, oh, thank you very much. Mineral resources estimated from 2001 project report. Here's the cold comparisons in Transcarpathian belt with the Slovakia similar deposit in Dominican Republic. Actually, in the State Geological Survey of Ukraine, we are planning for the regional mill complex in Transcarpathian region. It's an important development option. It was discussed within the Geological Survey of Ukraine and the possibility to building the central mill complex to serve the several existing deposits. Germanium. Germanium is contained in brown coal that makes the projects comparable with the Chinese peers. Graphite. Graphite is being produced in Ukraine since Soviet Union within the proven reserves of 6.5 million tons. Deposit is the largest in Ukraine. Let's go to the our real earth elements. Perga is situated where you can see in the northern part of Ukraine. Perga is a unique project that contains several nearby projects that includes world-class beryllium deposits and prospective real earth element greenfields. Unfortunately, it's on the very early exploration stage. Concerning beryllium mineral resources base in Ukraine includes one large Perzansky deposit, as I was told, prepared for exploration. Additional resources, titanium and real earth elements. Novopoltavsky deposit is Ukrainian apatite. It's an average deposit, but Ukrainian chemical plants are 100% depend upon imported apatite. Novopoltavsky, some additional is 0.7% of real earth elements. There is the comparisons with projects in Sweden and Tanzania. Lithium. Lithium opportunities. Ukraine has some significant lithium deposits that have been developed in the resource stage. Actually, Ukraine has additional advantages of having excellent infrastructure and to be relatively close to Western European industrial customer markets. With the rapid development of lithium battery technology, lithium is poised to see rapid increase in demand. Polochivsky project advantages. This project compares very favorably with other projects in Europe and Canada, and similar stage of development. Here we have the comparisons. Polochivska and with Finland and Canada deposits. Titanium. There you can see titanium deposits in Ukraine. Ukraine has significant mineral base of titanium. Identified 40 deposits, including 2 unique, 12 large, and 10 medium. 12 deposits were exported in detail and transferred to industry. 6 are being developed. The level of potential resources of titanium and ilmenite concentrate production capacity estimated of 20% of the world balance. There is 3 main deposit types represented in Ukraine, you can see on the slide. So, there is represented the dominant producers of the ilmenite and rutile ores in concentrates. It's a Ukrainian United Mining and Chemical Company. It's a state-owned company. Mazhorishensky Mining Concentration Complex, Valky Ilmenite, and Belta. Concerning titanium dioxide production, so the fact is that 20% of the world ilmenite resources can be found in Ukraine. There is not only opportunities, but also demands extend vision. For example, the construction of the substitute for Crimean titanium industrial joint. Also, in the end, in the end, what you should invest in Ukraine? Ukraine is a large, resource-rich country, well endowed with infrastructure, highly technical workforce, and long mining history. Thanks to European Union and Ukraine Association Agreement and deep and comprehensive free trade area, Ukraine is well prepared to receive the funding to develop its mineral potential. Geological Survey of Ukraine has numerous projects spanning to a range of commodities that were exported in Soviet era and some since independence, and is actively seeking financial mining partners to provide technical experience, expertise, and financial resources to advance and develop its mineral portfolio. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kashuk. I did want to ask you just one question. In one of your slides related to gold, you indicated that there are plans to launch a central processing mill, if I understood correctly.
It's Transcarpathian
Transcarpathian Belt.
Yes.
Is that going to be a state-owned mill, or are you looking for private investment?
It depends on the way how things goes in the nearest future, because some deposits are state-owned right now, and some deposits is in private owned company. By the way, this company has already attracted good financing in stock exchanges all over the world. They are on the stage to begin.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. We have copies. There was quite a bit of detail in the comparisons amongst the Ukrainian projects and global projects, which require some more attention. Now we're going to shift our focus to Kazakhstan. And we're very pleased to have 2 speakers from Kazakhstan. And our first speaker will be Mr. Galim Nurjanov, who is the chairman of Kaz Geologia. Mr. Nurjanov, please.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые коллеги. Я извиняюсь, я на русском. Хотел бы поздравить наших женщин с праздником. У нас тоже это в Казахстане празднуется. Меня зовут Галым Нуржанов. Я председатель национальной геологоразведочной компании. Наша компания очень молодая, создана по указу президента нашего Назарбаева. Компания уже за короткое время приобрела очень хороший авторитет. Начали работать с крупными транснациональными компаниями. В данное время компания ориентируется на государственное геологическое изучение недр, привлечение инвестиций в геологоразведку и, конечно, трансфер новых технологий, которые в мире используются для нахождения новых месторождений на хорошей глубине. Мы сейчас уже начали работать с прошлого года с такими крупными компаниями, как Rio Tinto, Iluka Resources, Корис, корейская национальная компания, Jogmec, японская национальная компания и немецкий инвестиционный фонд, Улмусфонд. Все эти компании уже начали работать. Есть уже хорошие результаты. Мы уже третий год участвуем в Канаде в PDAC. И в этом году впервые мы здесь поставили стенд. Любое время можете подойти. Там есть наши консультанты, полностью будут информировать. И у нас уже есть канадские партнеры, которые здесь тоже уже присутствуют. Мы компаниями Geotech уже создали совместное предприятие, называется Казгеотек, и в Казахстане уже ведем аэрографические съемки. И в ближайшее время уже хотим выйти в соседние страны, включая еще Иран. Здесь еще у нас присутствует компания Феникс, тоже, это тоже наш уже хороший партнер, вместе работаем, применяем их технологии и уже подаем хорошие результаты. Здесь я хотел просто вкратце объяснить. И на наш форум сделан хороший видеоролик. Если разрешите, если видеоролик готов, просьба включить.
You are ready for new discoveries. Largest country in the world, situated in the heart of the Eurasian continent, a country with cultural and ethnic diversity and a population of 17 million people, with a territory of boundless open spaces, breathtaking scenery, and incredible architecture. Welcome to Kazakhstan. Discover the incredible wealth. Ranked as the 6th one in the world by its reserves of natural resources, Kazakhstan is a leader in uranium reserves, chrome, ore, lead, molybdenum, and iron ore. After the word potential, add mining. Through implemented policies and strong government support, Kazakhstan has great opportunities and advantages for investment in mining. Kazakhstan ranks 18th in the investment attractiveness of mining. During the period from 2000 to 2015, the volume of investments in the subsoil equal to US dollars 253.7 billion. Since historical times, Kazakhstan occupies an important position in the trading area between Russia, China, India, and Europe. 3 of the 5 BRICS countries are close in proximity to Kazakhstan, providing access to the market of more than 500 million people. In 2010, Kazakhstan, along with Russia and Belarus, became a member of the Customs Union, creating a single economic space in 2012. In December 2015, Kazakhstan joined the World Trade Organization. Furthermore, Kazakhstan is actively working with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development to improve the investment climate in the country. The distinguishing feature of Kazakhstan is its internal political stability. The scale of international events held in Kazakhstan indicates increase of country as a politically stable partner in the world. The choice of the capital of Kazakhstan to host the international exhibition Expo 2017 clearly demonstrates it. Kazakhstan is implementing an intensive program for the construction of transportation networks within Norizol Path to the Future program. Successful implementation of the program will turn the country into one of the largest transit hubs throughout Eurasia. Integration into the international transport infrastructure is also a priority for the improvement of the trade potential of the Republic. The Transcontinental Road Corridor, Western Europe, Western China, is a strategic project of the new generation. Since from its launch, the cargo transportation period will be reduced to 10 days. Innovative reforms in the education system also maintain the rapid pace of development of the state. Every year, the country produces thousands of highly qualified professionals, including more than 500 specialists in the field of geology and mining. According to the International Rating of Doing Business in 2016, Kazakhstan is among the top 50 countries on the ease of doing business, ranking 25th in the protection of investors and the 18th in taxation. The rate of corporate income tax is 20%, the value-added tax 12%. In addition, Kazakhstan has 10 special economic zones, CEZ, aimed at the development and support of various industries. All zones operate under the special tax regime. The participants of CEZ are provided with free land available for up to 10 years. Conceptual legislative reforms are conducted in the field of geology and subsoil use in order to improve the competitiveness of the sector and ensure transparency and openness of the access process to subsoil. At the end of the year, a subsoil code based on international best practices will be adopted. The right to explore in a simplified manner, based on the Australian experience, first come, first served, is provided. The term of the contract is approximately 1 month. Online system greatly facilitating the work of subsoil users has been implemented. Today, everyone can work remotely with electronic filing, which contains information on more than 130,000 geological reports. There is also an interactive allocation map of existing subsoil facilities of the Republic of Kazakhstan. Its use allows determining the freeness of territory of subsoil use and examining the contract holder. In addition, work on the transition to international accounting standards on mineral resources is being carried out. This year, Kazakhstan plans to join CERBA. In Kazakhstan, the right to subsoil use can be provided by the following: tender, or auction, or on the basis of direct negotiations. In June 2016, within the framework of Astana Mining and Metallurgy, International Mining and Metallurgy Forum, 100 new objects will be put up for auction. The Ministry for Investment and Development of the Republic of Kazakhstan is the competent authority for granting subsoil use rights for exploration and mining of solid minerals. On the basis of direct negotiation, contracts can be concluded on the following: on extraction with a body that discovered the deposit on the basis of a contract for exploration, or on the exploration in a simplified manner, or with the subjects of industrial and innovative activity, or with the national company. National Exploration Company, KAZ Geology, can receive the subsoil use right for exploration of solid minerals through direct negotiations. KAZ Geology was established at the request of the President of the Republic of Kazakhstan, is actively working to attract foreign investment and exploration in the territory of the Republic of Kazakhstan. Today, KAZ Geology is successfully implementing joint projects with a number of world-class companies such. In the current year, it is planned to start new projects with investors from Japan, Poland, and Iran. KAZ Geology also offers its partner complete informational, analytical, administrative support, the choice of prospective sites, as well as the range of exploration services, with the use of modern equipment and advanced technology, including aerial photography, ground geophysical surveys, and drilling. to improve the investment climate and provide a direct dialogue between the government and foreign investors, the Council of Foreign Investors, under the President of the Republic of Kazakhstan, has been established. The Investment Ombudsman operates in order to solve problematic issues of foreign investors and protect their rights. As you can see, Kazakhstan is a country of incredible opportunities and discoveries. We do our best to make working with us profitable.
Спасибо за внимание. Я еще здесь вот нам показали как раз видеоролики. В этом году в июне месяце у нас будет Астана майнинг, конгресс большой. И в этом конгрессе мы в одном геологическом секторе хотели сделать аукцион. Там будет выставлено более 100 объектов, которые первый раз такое будет. Поэтому все, кто хочет участвовать, приглашаем в Казахстан. Добро пожаловать.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Akbatir Nadirbayev, who will talk in a little bit more detail about the evolution of mining regulations in Kazakhstan. And then our final speaker will be Professor Alexander Antonov, and we should have some time for questions.
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги, дамы и господа. Позвольте поприветствовать вас от имени Комитета геологии и недропользования Министерства по инвестициям и развитию Республики Казахстан и поблагодарить организаторов проходящего форума. Мой коллега практически все рассказал через ролик, но тем не менее я хочу немножко остановиться о совершенствовании законодательства в сфере геологии и недропользования и о новых возможностях для инвестиций в недропользование и геологоразведке Казахстана. Коллега мой говорил о том, что третий раз принимаем участие, но впервые такой широкой делегации и по инициативе нашего посла господина Жигалова впервые на этом форуме организовали национальный фонд стенд Республики Казахстан. Ну, как уже говорили, Казахстан богат минеральными ресурсами и рациональное его использование, совершенствование законодательства в сфере геологии и недропользования обладает новыми возможностями для сотрудничества. Республика у нас не только горный металлургический комплекс, но и нефтегазовый комплекс являются и остаются приоритетными отраслями экономики, и основной задачей для развития которых является обеспечение действующих перспективных производств минеральными ресурсами. В настоящее время в сфере геологии и недропользования проходят определенные этапы реформирования. Значит, для Республики Казахстан 2015 год был в этом отношении принципиально переломным годом в связи с тем, что действующий закон о недрах недропользования были внесены множество дополнений, изменений, поправки, которые были направлены на снятие барьеров в работе недропользователей, совершенствование отраслевой правовой базы, улучшение инвестиционного климата и привлечение прямых инвестиций, особенно иностранных инвестиций в отрасль. В частности, изменение в закон содержит следующие концептуальные системы поправки. Это, о чем сегодня уже неоднократно говорилось: упрощенный порядок предоставления права недропользования по опыту Австралии. Второе, впервые внедрение аукциона в качестве нового способа выбора победителя на конкурсе. Внедрение аукциона в качестве нового способа выбора победителей на конкурсе. Третье. Сокращение до 60% обязательных экспертиз по действующим контрактам. Предусмотрены сроки для устранения нарушений со стороны недропользователей, упорядочивающие отношения компетентных органов и недропользователей в вопросах принятия мер по отстающим в исполнении обязательств контрактами. Пятое – это освобождение недропользователей по добычным контрактам твердых полезных ископаемых от обязанностей согласовывать изменения объемов добычи в пределах 20% от проектных показателей. Были исключены составление технико-экономического обоснования из перечня обязательных проектных документов. То есть, таким образом, была исключена дополнительная экспертиза. Ну и устранение пробелов в части расширения контрактной территории. Раньше для того, чтобы недропользователю расширить свою контрактную территорию, приходилось немало времени тратить. Ранее недропользователь дважды получал заключение экологической экспертизы на контракт и на проектные документы, а также дважды получал заключение экономической экспертизы на контракт и на технико-экономическое обоснование. Вот в соответствии с внесенными изменениями исключены требования по проведению на всех стадиях недропользования обязательной экологической экспертизы контрактов, а также проведение экономической экспертизы контракта на стадии разведки. Впервые в законе о недрах недропользования австралийский метод предоставления права недропользования на разведку ТПИ, твердых полезных ископаемых. Вся территория республики будет поделена на блоки, и получение права недропользования на определенном блоке по времени займет только порядка 25 дней. Один блок составляет порядка 2 квадратных километров, с арендной ставкой в районе $1000, а минимальной рабочей программы не менее $1000. Недропользователь будет иметь возможность ознакомиться с геологической информацией на данном участке в течение 2 месяцев. В случае, если на заявленном участке в течение 5 суток будет подано более одной заявки, то право недропользования на такой участок уже будет предоставляться в порядке аукциона. Но аукцион является еще одним нововведением законодательства о недрах и отличается от действующей процедуры предоставления права недропользования своей простотой и прозрачностью, так как единственным критерием для определения победителя является размер подписного бонуса. До 1 месяца сокращены сроки предоставления геологической информации, в том числе за счет внедрения бонитетной системы для разведочных контрактов. Упрощенный метод получения прав на разведку будет способствовать развитию рынка малых юниорских компаний в Республике Казахстан. Кроме того, данный порядок распространения и на субъекты индустриальной инновационной деятельности, которые заинтересованы в обмен на недра, внедряют в Казахстан новые технологии. Что это? Это преимущество для инвесторов. Во-первых, ускоренный доступ к разведке, появление конкурентного рынка юниорской компании, удвоение рынка инженерных и сервисных компаний. Тем не менее, основная трансформация законодательства в сфере недропользования закладывается в Кодекс о недрах недропользования. Сейчас разрабатывается Кодекс о недрах недропользования, проект уже есть. В прошлом году, в 2015 году, была утверждена концепция настоящего кодекса, и буквально вот в феврале месяце мы запустили для обсуждения и для широкой публики специалистов, которые занимаются в области недропользования. Поэтому любой желающий, консалтинговые фирмы и специалисты, которые задействованы в области недропользования, имеют возможность принять активное участие в доведении до совершенства разрабатывания настоящего кодекса о недрах недропользования. Особую надежду мы возлагаем на развитие рынка юниорской компании в сфере геологоразведки. Благодаря внедрению австралийской модели мы ожидаем удвоения рынка юниорской компании в течение 3 лет. Это новые контракты и новые рабочие места. Развитие юниорской компании в Казахстане послужит способом выгодных капиталовложений для инвесторов. Имеющиеся прогнозные ресурсы приоритетных видов полезных ископаемых свидетельствуют, что общие запасы богатств в недрах Казахстана несколько раз выше, чем мы сегодня имеем, и подтверждает необходимость проведения дальнейшего геологического изучения недр. Сегодня вот в ролике было сказано, ну и всем известно о том, что практически по многим видам полезных ископаемых по разведанным запасам Казахстан занимает ведущие места, но и потенциальные прогнозные ресурсы, которые имеются практически по многим видам полезных ископаемых, говорит о том, что есть большие перспективы нашей республики в целом по прогнозным ресурсам. Ну, например, прогнозные ресурсы золота оцениваются порядка 10 тысяч тонн, в том числе золоторудных месторождений порядка 8 тысяч тонн. То есть по золоторудным месторождениям, которые развиты практически на всей территории Республики Казахстан и имеют большие потенциальные ресурсы. По прогнозным ресурсам меди оценивается порядка 100 миллионов тонн. В пределах, они, конечно, известны в пределах известных уже рудных районов, полей, глубоких горизонтов, флангов месторождений. Но, тем не менее, и вот сегодня было сказано о том, что, используя новейшие методы аэрогеофизики, мы выходим на новые перспективные площади и можем в ближайшем будущем найти, обнаружить месторождения, которые были ранее недоступны для наших геологов. Что касается прогнозных ресурсов цинка, свинца, оценивается в республике порядка 135 миллионов тонн. Это в основном развито на южном, центральном, восточном регионе нашей республики. Ну а территория республики, знаете, это огромная. По площади мы занимаем 9-е место в мире, поэтому возможности обнаружения новых месторождений очень большие. Но не буду останавливаться, мой коллега уже рассказал, руководитель Казгеологии, но тем не менее, вот крупные компании, которые пришли и работают в партнерстве, работают по таким направлениям поисков месторождений золота, титана, рассыпных олова и полиметаллических руд. Ну, возможности для проведения данных работ у нас большие, поэтому есть возможность дальше расширить. Сегодня было упомянуто о том, что у нас в республике президентом Казахстана Нурсултаном Назарбаевым было обозначено 100 конкретных шагов по реализации 5 институциональных реформ. Согласно плану по реализации этих реформ, 100 шагов, одним из главных является, для нас главных является шаг так называемый 74 и 75. Значит, мы с прошлого года начали активно заниматься разработкой проблемных вопросов по внедрению международной системы стандартов отчетности по запасам полезных ископаемых. И на сегодняшний день мы достигли определенного успеха. Можно сказать, в прошлом году, в ноябре месяце, мы презентовали свой кодекс по международным стандартам Бразилии. Международный комитет Крижска принял к сведению и поддержал нас. И если все будет возможность, мы уже уверены в этом, в рамках форума, который будет проходить 15-16 июня в городе Астана, в столице нашей республики, Астана Майнинг, мы должны войти в семейство Крижска. Многим, наверное, известно о том, что Международный комитет Крижска входит с прошлого года 10 стран. как раз когда мы в Бразилию ездили, наша делегация, была принята государство Бразилии в этот. И мы надеемся, что... 9 стран. Мы надеемся, что Казахстан будет 10-м членом этого международного комитета Крижского. Ну и о чем мы сегодня говорили, разрабатывается кодекс о недрах недропользования, он должен быть принят в конце 2016 года. И вот это вот внедрение международного стандарта по публичной отчетности по запасам полезных ископаемых, не только твердых полезных ископаемых, но и по углеводородному сырью, все эти моменты должны рассматриваться в этом разрабатываемом кодексе о недрах недропользования. Таким образом, в результате реализации реализации шага 74 будут созданы условия для увеличения числа казахстанских экспертов по аудиту публичной отчетности. Значит, в этом вопросе опыт Казахстана не такой уж большой, поэтому сегодня было об этом озвучено. В прошлом году наша делегация приезжала в Канаду, встречались с представителями института СИМ. Мы будем в этом направлении работать совместно, приглашаем профессионалов, которые работают не только в Канаде, но и приходят к нам на помощь представителям руководителей Южноафриканского государства, представителей комитета Крижского. И наша задача в этом году провести в Казахстане, начать обучение экспертов по проблемным вопросам по внедрению международных стандартов риска. Кроме того, в целях повышения инвестиционной привлекательности геологической отрасли на веб-портале Комитета геологии обновлена была интерактивная карта размещения действующих объектов недропользования по твердым полезным ископаемым, по углеводородному сырью, по всем другим видам полезных ископаемых. Это позволяет определить быстро свободность территории Казахстана от недропользования, узнать, какие компании недропользователи работают, создать картограмму изученности, ну и различную информацию получать по интерактивной карте. Разработана обновленная версия электронной системы карты геологических отчетов на сайте Комитета геологии. В режиме онлайн обеспечен доступ к метаданным отчетов. В целом можно получить информацию о хранящихся геологии физической информации, хранящихся в республиканских и территориальных геологических фондах нашей республики. Таким образом, мы создаем все условия для того, чтобы геологическая изученность нашей республики повышалась, и в этом вопросе приняли активное участие крупные игроки в геологической отрасли не только в Республике Казахстана, но и крупные компании, которые имеют большой опыт по изучению, по проведению геологоразведочных работ в республиках, в других странах мира. Поэтому, создавая такие условия, мы приглашаем инвесторов к активному сотрудничеству с Республикой Казахстан и выражаем надежду на взаимовыгодное сотрудничество. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Nadirbayev, if I may ask Professor Antonov to take the podium to present his views on Uzbekistan. Пожалуйста, садитесь.
Dear Chairman, dear participants, dear ladies and gentlemen. I stress ladies because, as all speakers, I use this opportunity to congratulate the wonderful ladies which accompany us in this audience with this remarkable date. On some reasons, the representatives of Uzbek mining sector are not participating in this event, CERBA event, and in mining show this year. But all the picture of Central Asia mining is not complete without Uzbekistan. That's why I was asked to briefly update this audience about the potential of Uzbek mining sector for Canadian business. This is the title of this presentation, Potential of Uzbek mining sector for Canadian business. This presentation was made on short notice. That's why it does not contain so many illustration slides like the previous ones. But I hope that the major information would be delivered to the audience. Over the last 2 years, the Canadian business missions to Uzbekistan were frequent and quite successful. We met and had discussions with top managers of 3 major bodies: State Committee on Geology and 2 major mining complexes. Maybe you know those names. They are Navoy and Al-Malik near Tashkent. And those meetings confirmed a huge potential of Uzbek mining sector for Canadian business. Uzbekistan is rich in mineral resources, different types of mineral resources like copper, lead, zinc, silver, tungsten, and mineral fertilizers. But the major wealth of Uzbekistan is gold. Please, my slide. This map shows gold deposits, gold mines of Central Asia without Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. It was prepared by South African Goldfields Limited, which keeps license, exploration license in Kyrgyzstan, Talas Valley. But it is figures, the figures of resources are not official figures. It's like assessment of goldfields, but it's very instructive for comparison. We see that southern Tanshan gold belt extends from western Uzbekistan, western desert of Kizilkum, through neighboring territories of Tajikistan and Kyrgyz Republic, up to Xinjiang province in China. It's a world-class and a world significance gold belt. Most of the deposits are large size disseminated mineralization in the terrigenous black shale complexes. The resources of some of them come up to 10 million ounces. This is in Uzbekistan. Some of them are 3 million ounces, which is not pretty good, also pretty good. And Kumtor Kumtor is super large property. It's about 500 tons of gold, or 17 million ounces. But the real gem of southern Tian is Muruntau. You can see that it's 10 times larger than Kumtor. It's super large, it's unique deposit. And it's Muruntau open pit. It's largest in the world, 3.5 kilometer by 2.5 kilometers, and its depth is coming now to 600 meters. It's the largest and unique in the world. Mining commenced here on the deposit in 1967, and production has been continuous since then. The next year would be 50th anniversary of production of Muruntau. Sorry, 50 years of production. We can see that the major gold deposits of southern Tian Shan, metallogenic province or gold belt, are concentrated in western Uzbekistan. We can see here several ore fields, and Muruntau, of course, the major one, which is run by Navoy Mining and Metallurgical Combinat, combined. The annual output of gold and Navoy combined is about 2 million ounces, so it's more than 60 tons of gold, its annual production. Uzbekistan in the list of top 10 countries on gold production. And besides Muruntau, which is often pitable deposits, there are a number of underground mines in the area. You can imagine how many kinds of mining equipment and spare parts the Navoy combine purchases every year. When we visited Navoy combine, the chief engineer told us that they invite Canadian manufacturers to take part in the tenders, which is regular and published announcement of those tenders. I just quote what they're saying. The chief general director, Mr. Sanakulov, said, "We feel a lack of work from Canadian side." Deputy General Director said, "We are interested in Canadian technologies in uranium production. We are looking forward to Canadian bidding for mining equipment supplies." I forgot to tell that Navoy Mining Combinat is mining not only gold but also uranium, like neighboring Kazakhstan, the same technology, underground leaching technology, and Uzbekistan is a part of the same uranium province as Kazakhstan here. Of course, Kazakhstan is the leader, world leader, but Uzbekistan share in the uranium production is also substantial. And also mineral fertilizers also mined by Navoy Combinat. Now let's look to the north, to Al-Malik. It's geologically a completely different situation. It's a volcanogenic, paleovolcanic region with typical gold porphyry deposits, which is known all over the world, in South America, in United States, in Canada, for example, Highland Valley copper, who knows from Canadians, it's the same type of deposits. It's open pitable, huge amount of ore, billions of tons, and copper grade, it's like 0.3, 0.5% typically, and the gold grade is also 0.3, 0.5, but gram per ton, not per percent, but gram per ton. Al-Malik deposits is not one deposit, single deposit. It's a cluster of deposits. And while one of them is under operation, it's called Kalmakir, over 80 years, the other ones are just now on the start of development and expansion of mining operations. And it gives, it also signal to Canadian investors and suppliers of mining equipment. Besides this copper porphyry, Al-Malik Mining Combinat is also in charge of development of gold-silver deposits, vein deposits, which also pretty sizable in the same area near cities of Al-Malik and Angren, and they also need a lot of equipment, mining equipment, especially underground. I also would like to quote what we heard during that business missions, what they say. Our major headache is construction of underground working, because there's no experience in Uzbekistan. They concentrate on open pits, but underground working, Russian companies and other invited for that. But they would like to see also Canadian expert. They said, we use the Chinese, Polish, Russian mining equipment, but we are not receiving Canadian bids for supply. They're interested in Canadian equipment. They know that they're world famous. And what I said, that one of the mines in Al-Malik is under operation over 80 years. They just started neighboring mine, which is called Dalnie, and the construction would be started in 2 years, 2018. It's a great opportunity for Canadian manufacturers of mining equipment. What else? Another potential customer for Canadian technologies, Canadian equipment, is State Committee on Geology and Mineral Resources. The last year, large delegation of State Committee was here, but now on some organization problems, they did not visit PDAC and CERBA. But they already use for a number of years Canadian exploration equipment of Syntrex, Gem Systems, and Phoenix Geophysics, who are here now, Phoenix Geophysics, and they are happy with the quality of Canadian geophysical technique. The chairman, during our business mission, the chairman, Mr. Turamuradov, noted that beginning with 2010, the government allocates substantial funds for modernization. So the door also open for new purchases, for new bidding in tenders which they announce. So we can conclude that Uzbekistan is badly interested in foreign investments in innovative technologies. The Uzbekistan enterprises are looking forward to cooperation with Canadian companies. So Canadian companies are welcome to Uzbekistan. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Antonov. We have some time for questions. Our lunch is being prepared. We have until 2 o'clock. We have a very interesting session after lunch. I urge you all to come back where you can hear in some detail successes that Western firms, Canadian companies have had in Russia and in Kazakhstan. So, but for now, I'd like to open the floor to questions. I'll pass the microphone over to JP, who can pass it further, and hopefully we have some questions to our panelists. Ladies first. It's International Women's Day, so Alina Pekarsky, please. We need a microphone for the audience as well. There's another one here. Okay. Oh, there's one there in the middle of the floor. Okay. Just there you go.
Hello. First of all, I want to welcome everybody who is here today. I want to introduce myself. I'm Alina Pekarsky, and I work at the Schulich School of Business for many years on various educational programs for top executives in different industry, and mining is probably one of the industry of most interest, because in 2011 Schulich School of Business started to offer MBA in mining program. But as senior account executive at Executive Development Division, I would like just to ask everybody whom I heard who would be interested in educational program in the area of management, leadership, trade, like everything related to business and investment. And I want to mention that Schulich School of Business and Lou Naumovsky always confirm that from 1990 have many educational programs in for young businessmen in 90s, and later for Canada-Russia program in corporate governance was for 7 years, and we have 150 alumni. So we always want to develop custom-tailored program. So the question, this is an announcement, I'm sorry, I took advantage.
Thank you for the question. Please.
Yes. Okay, so the question would be, would it be interest of coming to countries with conference and so on, or bringing people here? Because the first thing is ideal, but sometimes very difficult to arrange. And PDAC is a great place. So welcome. I finish.
So the question, if I can take license and rephrase it, is what is the best way to promote opportunities for development of mining professionals in each of the countries that are represented today? That's a very big question.
Very big question.
It has a big price tag on it as well,
yes.
I believe. And that's the key, just my personal opinion. Maybe we can try to reformulate it and ask specifically, what are the initiatives undertaken in each of the countries represented to develop perhaps the business side of geology and mining engineering? Is that a fair question?
I think it's
okay.
Very...
I don't know if the interpreters got that, but I might ask our colleagues from Kazakhstan first to see, given the reforms that we heard about today, the movement towards what they called the Australian model, the desire to be part of CRISCO, what other steps are being taken to develop cadres of not just geologists, not just mining engineers, but people you might see at PDAC who have the technical background, but also who have business and finance emphasis, because as much as PDAC is a mining conference, it's also a financing and investment conference. Пожалуйста, есть соображения?
У нас
Работает.
У нас сейчас вот Назарбаев университет, мы с ним совместно начинаем строительство геологического центра, и там у нас предусмотрен полностью подготовка и переподготовка кадров. Как раз сейчас Назарбаев университет уже провела несколько переговоров, я думаю, что это удачных. Это Colorado School of Mines, совместно с ними, они будут обучать наших специалистов. Первые 3 года они будут здесь, в Казахстане учиться, потом остальные 2 курса они будут в Колорадо заканчивать и уже будут заканчивать на знание 3 языков, и полностью любой момент, это любой горной отрасли могут работать.
Видите, Алина, вы опоздали немножко.
Ну, я думаю, что mining world is big. Я хочу подчеркнуть, что школа Шулиха предлагает... На английском. Перевод идет. I want to emphasize that Schulich School of Business not dealing really with engineering part, taken into consideration, of course, all technologies, but the need that we see is in the area of corporate governance, corporate social responsibility, mergers and acquisition, everything that kills business, actually. And I think we have a lot of experience, and we need you to give input. It's the stage of the game and politics in the world that we have to work together on developing the mechanism of improving relationship between different countries who are very rich in natural resources. But for different reasons, there are problems in different areas. So I think that we need some kind of body that would discuss that, and then we move ahead.
My personal view, again, I'm sorry for interjecting, but I think it's a matter of promotion.
Yes.
And we have distributed materials. CERBA has distributed materials about the program at Schulich. It's an excellent program, but until there's a presence of the head of that program in Moscow, where CERBA would be very happy to introduce representatives of Schulich, and specifically this program, to all of the mining faculties and all of the business schools and all of the finance academies in Russia. This is where you can establish the relationships. I don't know how the Kazakh connection, let me finish, with the Colorado School of Mines happened, but it's a two-way street. So we need to go to another question, Alina, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. More questions? Nathan, are you still interested in posing a question?
This may be difficult to translate. In Mr. Ariol's presentation, we talked about the new type of licensing through application, which I think you said can be translated as claim staking. Yeah. Is that a valid method of obtaining a license in Kazakhstan and Ukraine? I'm just curious if those two countries have similar facilities in place.
Пожалуйста.
The method
Работает.
The method how to obtain the license in Ukraine is quite similar, like in Russia and in Kazakhstan. So I want to inform that tomorrow at the our government meeting will be accepted a new degree that mostly simplifies the access to the license and to the fields. This system in Ukraine works, and a lot of components is in world-named companies is working in Ukraine, are working in Ukraine.
Thank you. I have a related question, and it's to our colleagues from Kazakhstan. I was intrigued. I didn't take personal offense that they did not use the Canadian model. They used the Australian model, but it's very close to the Canadian model. And this has to do with reserve calculation and statements. The discussion about the value of CRISCO as an organization, as a methodology by which to state reserves, to calculate reserves. This is a discussion we've had in Russia for some time as well. So the question to our Kazakh colleagues is, does the Australian model, in your understanding, mean that the Kazakh government or Kazgeologia or Kazakh banks are prepared to accept JORC reserve classification as a way to establish things such as cost of a mining license or calculation of potential revenue from a particular project? Because if I'm not mistaken, CRISCO itself is not recognized by financial institutions as a methodology that can produce a bankable feasibility study. If the question is, если вопрос не совсем понятен, я могу и на русском.
Хорошо, спасибо. Действительно, вопрос непростой для нас. Я уже говорил о том, что да, в рамках нового кодекса недропользования Республика Казахстан будет внедряться международные стандарты. Ну, как вы знаете, система КРИСКО — это кодексы, разработаны по шаблону единому, но каждое государство имеет свои особенности, свои нюансы. То есть мы пошли каким путем? Мы разработали кодекс свой по публичной отчетности по минеральным ресурсам и запасам. Задача теперь внедрять. Значит, что касается классификации запасов, да, здесь у нас пока существует система Государственной комиссии по запасам, то есть единая та система, которая действовала, существует до сих пор в странах СНГ. Но мы сейчас уже готовы, но это вопрос очень непростой, сложный, в том числе это касается и подготовки экспертов, независимых экспертов, которые могут иметь членство в признанных национальных организациях, как вот JORC или СИМ или там ПЕРК. То есть у нас сейчас для того, чтобы выйти из положения, мы в этом году должны у себя провести широкое обучение наших геологов, экспертов, которые могут заниматься подсчетом запасов. Создадим учебный центр, будем приглашать специалистов и иностранных, в том числе специалистов и консалтинговые группы. То есть, конечно, сразу перейти к, скажем, какой вопрос был задан, готовы ли мы сегодня? Я не могу сказать, что мы готовы. Мы этот процесс хотим в течение как минимум 2-3 лет внедрять. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. We have time for one more question. If somebody... Here we go.
Hello, Lou. Actually, my question to you as a Kinross representative in Russia, and unfortunately Robert left, but Alexander, my name is, I'm presenting a geotech company. Just I wanted to ask you about your plans to expand your interests in Far East of Russia in terms of exploration, and how you think now about Kazakhstan potential for Kinross.
In our company, by the way, of you who are not aware, we celebrated 20 years in Russia last October. in Moscow. It was a milestone for our company, but also an indication to other investors that it's possible to do business in Russia and to remain for a long time. So we're very encouraged by our experience. We look, in the last few years, our greenfield exploration, our brownfield exploration has not diminished. In fact, it's one advantage of the devaluation of the ruble. We can drill more holes for the same money. So that's not a bad thing. Although our contractors in drilling are also not standing still, and they are adjusting their prices as we speak. We are very keen to expand in the region in which we currently work, in Chukotka. I have tried, as the chairman of the organizing committee of this event, to get the governor of the Chukotka Okrug to come and to talk about his region. There have been reasons why he's been unable to come, but it is a very hospitable place to be a miner. We know a lot about the opportunities in the Chukotka Okrug. It's the size of France and has only 57,000 inhabitants. So it's underexplored, underdeveloped, but there are a lot of license areas that we're aware of, that we look at very, very carefully. When conditions are right, and each company, of course, public or private, knows for itself when these conditions are right, we, of course, would be interested primarily in expanding within our region. However, we're not standing still. We've, right on the Kupol license area, we have discovered a significant deposit, which is called Maroshka. Mining there, the development of the underground has begun already. It's only 5 kilometers from our mill at Kupol, and we expect to start producing gold there in 2018. On our Dvoynoy license area, we have found another promising brownfield, which we're currently developing and hope to start construction there sometime next year. So we're not standing still. We are very committed to Russia, and when the opportunities present themselves, we will expand. As far as Kazakhstan is concerned, we have not so far done much research even on Kazakhstan. We have a lot of people who know more about mining and geology than I do, but I probably know more about what's going on in Kazakhstan than anybody else in our company rather. So it's not currently on our program, but I'm absolutely impressed with the significant and fast-paced changes that we see in mining regulation. Whether it's an Australian model or a Canadian model, it's very, very positive. And I think we saw a map with some significant global players like Rio Tinto that have had a longer history in Kazakhstan, or have a history in Kazakhstan, which we do not. It says a lot to the rest of the market when companies like that feel ready, as they did, I guess, a year and a half ago, to announce 5 joint ventures just a few weeks after the lifting of the moratorium on issuance of new licenses in Kazakhstan. So it's very, very positive. We have our hands full as a company in Chukotka currently with the projects we're working on. As you may know, we recently acquired additional projects in Nevada, in the US. So, we intend to remain a global player, and clearly Russia is definitely part of our global strategy. And Kazakhstan, at some point, we are going to have to look, the geologists, and not just the generalists like myself, are also going to start to look more carefully. I don't know if that answers your question, but...
Thank you.
Alexei.
Just a couple of words. I would like to soothe your national pride by saying that we at the ministry are taking much stronger interest in Canadian experience over the Australian one. I just can mention that I am authorized to deliver a presentation on the licensing and regulations issues, at least in Toronto province, just on my return to the office. And the main objective, of course, is to tap into your experience of stimulating the juniors and the independent companies, which basically I understand both in our country as well as with our neighbors is one of the major objectives for stimulating the exploration.
Well, thank you, Alexei. Thank you for coming to my rescue. We're very pleased. As some of you know, we have also invested quite a bit of intellectual capital to share global experience, to provide constructive recommendations to Russia. And I think whichever model countries in our region, in the Eurasia region, should use, it's very clear that the key is development of junior mining. The key is development of capital markets, which is what PDAC, as both Robert and Andrew mentioned, PDAC lobbies the Canadian government for the kinds of tax incentives necessary to encourage institutional and retail investors to invest in these companies. Most senior gold producers acquire their new properties from junior miners. And that's a proven, successful method, and I'm very, very pleased that our colleagues from the region have taken that lesson and that they're making huge strides in support of development of junior mining in the country. So congratulations to everyone. If there are no further questions, I would like... Oh, I have a question there. One hand went up. I'm blinded by the light, but I did see it is International Women's Day, so...
Sorry to keep your attention 1 minute more. My question is to Galim Nurjanov. As representative of transport company, Ocean Carrier, I have seen in your little video clip that you are constructing very aggressive transport resort, and it was a mention of 10 days transit time. From where to where? And about what resort? I didn't hear. I missed this point.
Это у нас Западная Европа, Западный Китай. Это с границы Китая, начиная до Восточной Европы. Это как шелковый путь раньше у нас кочевники ходили по нему, вот транспортный коридор. Это как бы автобан для грузовых перевозок. Получается, за 10 дней можно от границы Китая до Восточной Европы, это напрямую можно доставлять грузы.
Thank you very much. Well, please join me in thanking our panelists. A modest lunch awaits us, and I would really appreciate if we could all come back in time for our second session at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.